Hello everyone, Storm11 here. Today we'll be talking about some severe weather potential across parts of the high plains and even including the central plains. For today, the severe weather threat will move to the east, more focus across parts of the Midwest. Tomorrow, then a couple days later, another threat severe weather may come in across parts of the Midwest again, later on down the road for this upcoming weekend. I want to take a quick break on the tropics for today just because there's not really an update needed for the tropics. Everything's kind of going as forecasted, but we are starting to see some severe weather return to the forecast for other parts of the United States as well. So we're going to have to mention this as well. So let's go and get started with the SPC Outlook here. So this is for today. We got a slight risk for severe weather across parts of northeastern Colorado, southeastern Wyoming, southwestern South Dakota, the western half of Nebraska, and far northwestern Kansas. Main threats, there will definitely be some hail out there. Damage winds will also be there, but you do have that tornado threat. It's also elevated to a 5%. Across parts of northeastern Colorado, western Nebraska, even for a few counties in southwestern South Dakota, with that 5%. All threats will definitely be possible in the setup here, including for the threat of tornadoes. There'll be a decent amount of wind shear around. Also, to be a decent amount of instability that can lead to all these storm modes out there as well. Severe weather risk moves to the east tomorrow. We got a broad slight risk area for eastern Nebraska, eastern South Dakota, southeastern North Dakota, pretty much the southern half of Minnesota, far western Wisconsin, most of Iowa as well, and maybe even for a county or two in northeastern Kansas as well. Hail will be there, same way for damage to winds. The tornado threat will stay kind of on the western side of the risk area. This is going to be associated with a negative tilt trough that'll be moving in across parts of the central and northern plains here, and that's going to lead to a decent amount of wind shear, and that can increase that tornado threat as well. So something we need to focus on. Day 3, the cold front starts to move to the east. However, the low pressure system would be very far north, well up into Canada. Even though there's going to be quite a bit of instability in these areas, there's still not going to be like of any wind shear to work with. If they're going to issue a marginal risk, which I think the chances of that's low, it'll probably be across some of these areas in here along that cold front. But some thunderstorms could develop along that cold front as well. But there's not going to be any wind shear to work with on day 3. Then on day 4, which is Sunday, that we got 15% slight risk across parts of northeastern Nebraska, eastern South Dakota, southern Minnesota, and most of Iowa as well within that risk there. Seems like all hazards might be possible on that setup as well. Let's kind of go backtrack. Let's actually just talk about today here. So this is what's going on right now. This is surface base Cape. Now, this is probably like 11 or 12 o'clock their time right now. So the instability values are not that impressive. However, if you look further to the south, you do see this nose of 2,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram of Cape. This is moving north and northwest here, moving into these areas in here. So there'll be a decent amount of instability to work with later on in the future. Meanwhile, for wind shear, there is 45 knots of wind shear. That's quite a bit of wind shear to work with. They can lead to some organized cells, and also they can lead to some supercells that has a chance of producing all hazards, including for the threat of tornadoes. Helicity is not that impressive. However, there is 100 uh, of M2S2. I'm not sure what that stands for, but anyways, there's gonna be a decent amount of story to Felicity. It's under 150, but it'll be enough to at least support a very low end tornado risk as well. Later today, here's the Super Silk composite. It's pretty low right now. I mean, it's still early afternoon or late morning for them folks, so the environment's not that impressive. However, there is quite a bit of wind shear in place that can lead to some severe weather later today. Downdraft Cape, yeah, it definitely support a damage to wind threat as well. Mid-level evaporates is actually elevated back back across parts of Colorado, that can lead to some stronger updrafts, and that can lead to a large hail threat. Low evaporates is very strong in some places, as high as a 9.5. That's pretty strong for a low evaporate. So yeah, we're definitely going to see that damage to wind threat and large hail as well. Those lap rates definitely support that, and also be favorable for tornadoes as well. That could lead to some rotating updrafts within some of those storms as well. So let's check out the HRRR model here, and this is its latest run. Shows cells developing sometime around 20Z here. You got storms back as far west as across parts of southwestern Colorado, but I don't think those storms won't be too much of an issue. But if you look into the risk zone here for severe weather, you do see some supercells starting to develop in those areas. At this point here, they could be producing some large hail with some of those strong updrafts. And with some of that wind shear to work with, that can lead to some spin as well. So there will be a chance for some tornadoes within some of these supercells. But when they start to cluster up and become a little bit more organized, that can lead to a damage wind threat. And you do see there is a squall line of storms as far north as parts of northwestern South Dakota, all the way down to northeastern Colorado as well. And when these cluster up, that can lead to a damage wind threat. And some of that convection may move into some of the next day for the next setup there as well. Here's a high-res NAM thoughts, and this has a tendency to cluster up too much. It has a bias of clustering up many storms, but you do see here it's a little different solution, but it still indicates some of those supercells, especially across parts of northeastern Colorado. I think that'd be an area to monitor. But you do see some of those supercells do move into southwestern Nebraska as well. And then again, some of these storms may try to cluster up and may produce a damage wind threat, like the higher NAM shows later into the overnight hours with a little cluster of thunderstorms kind of going along the South Dakota and Nebraska border as well. So that kind of loads in a little bit. Here's the NAM's thoughts on this. Shows a pretty similar scenario. Shows storms developing a little bit later than what the model showed, maybe a little bit too progressive. But it does show some of those scattered cells, and eventually some of those scattered cells can become a squall line, and that can lead to a damage wind threat as well. So here's the so we're kind of at 17Z right now. It's so far it's a little bit underdone with the instability, just a little bit. Like we seen earlier here on the surface-based cape, there's an area 5,000 joules per kilogram. Well, it's not really, that's a little off the screen. But in some of these areas here, that's 4,000 plus. And it's a little bit underdone with the instability right now, which is not good. Given the fact that if the models are underdone with instability, there actually could be more instability to work with than what they actually show. But you do see how some of this instability does work up to parts of northeastern Colorado, southwestern Nebraska, even into western Kansas as well. And with that greater instability, that makes the atmosphere unstable. That can lead to some severe storms. Let's check out a couple soundings here. This is in northeastern Colorado, which I think this would be a main area to watch here. And we'll see what it's got here. And you can see here, very small photograph. This will be favorable for probably for some smaller tornadoes. But there is going to be some wind shear to work with. Not a whole lot of wind shear, but it's enough to at least have a little tornado threat. Strong level lap rates. However, mid-level lap rates definitely support a large hail threat. Downdraft cape is also elevated, so this is favorable for all hazards. Maybe tornado threat maybe a little bit lower, but if any storm that develops in this environment here could produce damage to winds and some large hail. Let's go a little further up north. Let's kind of go along the Nebraska-Colorado border. See if we can find anything better up there. In this model here, maybe a little bit underdone with the cape here. And you can see here, the wind shear is a little bit better here. The holograph's not so much better. It's kind of the same, still small. but there's a slightly bit more wind shear to work with, at least story to felicity wise, but it'll still be enough for a tornado threat. But you do see here a decent amount of instability to work with. The lap rates and the downdraft cape both support a large hail and damage wind threat as well. So even though the tornado threat may stay a little lower, you still got the threat for large hail and damage winds from these storms. No doubt about it. And this is when storms start to fire up, and this is when you kind of get to the peak here of daytime heating here, and the sun starts to go down, and you start to lose some of that daytime heating. So this is kind of the environment at its peak. You do see here there is actually some better story to velocity numbers, which that can help with that tornado threat as well. Photograph's still going to stay small, but everything else here, large hail, damage winds, is also going to be around too. So the environment for tornadoes is a little bit better. It's actually above 150 in some places as well. Let's kind of go to the Nao model here. Let's see if it's got a little preference here. I'm not going to check out the environment or the soundings from the HER model because it's done pretty bad in the past, so I don't have a whole lot of trust in it. But the HER's Nao, for what I've seen, has done the best job out of the rest of the models. But let's check out the environment here from the NAM, and shows not much wind shear to work with. However, it does show the ridiculous amount of the low of lap rates is pretty impressive. Now 0.6 degrees Celsius per kilometer. That's pretty high there. That's very strong low lap rates to work with. That can lead to some strong level updrafts. Downdraft cape is also very elevated. Lap rates is there, so damage to winds and large hail will definitely be there with the sounding here as well. Let's go a little further north. Let's go into western Nebraska. And I think some of you models here may be a little bit underdone with the wind shear. I think the NAM's a little bit underdone. There's some greater wind shear out there than what the model is actually showing, so I actually take these as a grain of salt. But they still show a favorable environment here for large hail and damage winds. Those lap rates definitely support it, and even for the downdraft cape as well. And there's also a decent amount of instability. So I'll probably take that as a grain of salt since the model seems to be a little bit underdone with the wind shear, exception for the high-res NAM. Just doing a decent job with the wind shear. So I have a little bit more trust in the high-res NAM than the other models out there. So that's pretty much today's severe weather threat out of the way. Let's kind of go to tomorrow. So we're going to switch over to 12Z on the HER model. You do see some of those pretty impressive storms across parts of northeastern Colorado and western Nebraska. There's going to be some uncertainties on this setup here where we do have all this morning convection here that could keep the instability a little bit more limited. But with some of those outflow boundaries kind of left behind or along the dry line, new storms will form right behind it. And the good news is, even though there's a lot of wind shear to work with, the models are not really showing much in the way of supercell activity. It's more of a squall line mode of storms here, which that could lead to a damage wind threat, but it also lowers kind of the risk for large hail in the tornado threat. Although I would say the tornado threat will still stick around. I mean, you can still get tornadoes along the squall line, but most of the time they're short-lived and weaker. So there could be multiple tornadoes out there, but most of them will be weak and short-lived. That's very typical for QLCS tornadoes. You do see that squall line really erupt further south here. And this is actually a dry line here. Dry line is where, for the dew points here, it's active. It kind of acts like a cold front, but it's the moisture. It doesn't change the temperature. It actually changes the moisture along that front. You kind of tell here there's a strong low just to the northwest here, and you got this negative tilt trough just moving in here, back behind this dry line here as well. So that could definitely lead to some damage to winds and maybe some QLCS tornadoes as well, since there will be a decent amount of wind shear involved here. Let's check out the high-res NAM here. We'll go back to reflectivity. we'll do the same way with the NAM. And you can see here, for the next day here, it does show some of those thunderstorms erupt here along that dry line. You do some of these linear storm modes here. Not much in the way of supercell mode like it would be going on today. But you do see here, as you kind of get to the overnight hours or the evening hours, you do see a decent squall line out there. Could be a broken line here indicated by the higher snap, but I think mostly everybody would make it at least some thunderstorm activity at least here with this setup. We'll check out the Cape here. We'll check out the environment, and there's going to be a little bit more wind shear to work with than for today's setup. And you do see a nose of 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram. I think there'll be some areas that'll be exceeding the 4,000 mark. But let's get a couple soundings out there. We'll check out Northwestern Iowa here. It'll take a moment to load here. Okay, there you go. You can see here, it's a little better tornado setup here than today. You do have a little bit more wind direction with high. Also, the winds are a little bit stronger. There's a little better wind shear to work with. The photograph's at least a little bit larger. Low-level lap rates is there. However, mid-level lap rates looks to be lacking on this sounding here, so that kind of decreases the large hail threat. But damage winds will still be there with this setup here. But this is a decent sounding here, probably mainly for isolated tornadoes and maybe for damaging winds as well. We'll go a little further to the south here. We'll check out parts of southeastern Nebraska. And we'll see what the NAM is showing here. And then again, there is going to be a decent amount of wind shear to work with. However, the lap rates are kind of lacking out there. Doesn't really support much in way of a hail threat or damage wind threat, but you still got the downdraft cape of 1400. So I'll still say there's a damage wind threat. I also notice here between 700 and 850 millibars in this sounding, there's a mid-level cap there. And when you have a cap, that's like a warm air aloft. That's preventing from storms to develop. You want a cold air loft. If you got a cold air loft, those cumulus will be able to build. With the warm air loft, they can't really do that. So capping may be an issue down here, but it may break later in the day. But there's also a decent holograph as well, so this is favorable for large hail. Well, not really large hail, but there could be some hail out there either way. But damage winds and tornadoes. I've also noticed this here is there's actually um, the dew point line and the temperature line is actually spread apart around somewhere in 850 millibars. Meanwhile, at the surface here, it's not so much. That could definitely lead, that can really increase that damage wind threat as well. So that'll be definitely something we need to monitor here. And one last time, we'll check out Northeastern Kansas. Why not? And here you go. And it does show a lot of instability. That doesn't surprise me. But the first half you go, there's not going to be as much wind shear to work with. But it still shows a pretty low wind tornado threat within the sounding here. A lot of instability to work with, of course. Downdraft Cape is definitely supportive. Low lap rates as well. Seems like mid-level lap rates may be lacking a little bit. So this is probably the main threat would be damage winds with the sounding here. But probably a pretty, maybe a brief spin up tornado cannot be ruled out with the sounding there as well. Let's see what the NAM has to say, and you can see here, shows more of a broken band of storms, but it does show some better storm coverage further up north, a little bit more focused in Minnesota, and you do have some storms down across parts of Kansas and maybe into northern Oklahoma, as well later into the overnight hours. Well, let's check out the environment here very quick. So here's surface-based Cape. Pretty similar to what the Harris NAM has, but it's not. It's also a little further up north. Let's check out southwestern Minnesota, and we'll check out one more sounding, and we'll kind of move on. So actually it has a better setup here, actually more wind shear to work with. It's a better setup here for tornadoes. So you got better photograph there, more wind shear to work with. Uh, Even so wind direction of high. Plus there's also stronger winds aloft, so that can definitely help with that damage wind threat. Lap rates are not that impressive, but somewhat supportive for severe weather. Downdrift cape is also elevated as well. So this will be favorable here for maybe isolated hail, damage winds, and maybe even for a few tornadoes as well. That's actually a good sounding right there. That's a good tornado sounding there. Let's move a little further south. Let's move into western Iowa. See what we get here. This will be the last one here before we move on to Sunday. And it still shows a good sounding here for tornadoes here. Decent amount of wind shear to work with, good photograph. Lap rates on the low levels is stronger too. Lap rates is also there, at least in, well, downdrift cape is there, I meant to say. There's also a decent amount of instability. So, probably similar to what I said about the other sounding here. Some isolated large hail, maybe isolated tornadoes, and some damage winds as well. Not a bad sounding either. So, really, the areas I will monitor here on this day here are probably southwestern Minnesota, western Iowa, eastern Nebraska, eastern South Dakota, maybe as far south as northeastern Kansas, and far northwestern Missouri as well on this setup here. It's definitely something we need to monitor here over the next couple of days as well. And then let's kind of move on to Sunday setup here. The NAM is barely in range here, but it does show a nose of a decent amount of instability to work with here. Let me get a different color out so you guys can see a little better. So yeah, you got a nose there that's going up north. Pretty much about as far north as southern South Dakota. We'll see what soundings it shows. And this can change here. This is still a couple days away here. Plus, we don't really have much of any. Okay, I don't think. No, that's not even right. It says the GFS up there on top. Maybe we do not have soundings available here for the NAM. We'll try that again. Okay, here we go. It does show a favorable setup here. Not really for tornadoes. I mean, wind shear is pretty weak, except, well, storming to Felicity is pretty weak. There's some wind shear out there and not. Um, there's a decent amount of instability, at least surface based. Lap rates is pretty supportive. That'll support some large hail. And there's also some downdraft cape as well. So this will be favorable, morally focused on damage winds and some hail and its sounding. We'll go a little further south. Let's go into, I see something else here. There looks to be a cap here, from what I can tell here. Let's kind of go to the triple point of Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa. Wow. Talking about a sounding right here. Better than tomorrow's setup. You get a much better photograph. Quite a bit of wind shear to work with, especially for disoriented Felicity. Lap rates is supportive. Same way for downdraft cape as well. You got wind direction of high, which the winds are also elevated, so that can lead to damage wind threat as well. So this is favorable for all hazards in the sounding here. Actually, it's a better setup than tomorrow's. However, this could change here. It's still a couple days out, but we'll see if the trends will continue with the NAM, and eventually we'll see about the other models. We'll check out one more sounding into southwestern Iowa, see if how it looks like down there. With us signed in around, there could be a cap in place, so we'll see about that. Still a good sounding here. Good photograph, good amount of wind shear to work with. Low vibrates is supportive. Downdraft cape is also supportive. So this is, again, favorable for all hazards as well. But check out the wind direction of high. 700 millibars coming from the west. 850 millibars pretty much about from the southwest at the surface, directly coming from the south. That's quite a bit of wind direction with height, so pretty good setup there for some severe weather out there as well. But then again, things could change here. We'll definitely focus on Sunday's threat over the next couple of days, but it seems like all hazards is possible from the NAM. And we'll check out the reflectivity very quickly here. You do see here how some of these thunderstorms do fire up, and some of these could be supercells as well. If these are supercells, yeah, those definitely have the potential to produce all hazards as well. So still something to watch there over the next couple of days as well. But then again, it can change. Let's go a little farther out here. Let's actually backtrack to 6 to 10 days. We'll check out the climate predictor really quick. And this is for days 6 through 10, or you could say August the 24th to the 28th. And you do see here some cooler than average temperatures across parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest. That ain't bad. However, it looks like it's going to stay warm for at least the southern half of the United States here, even including a good chunk of the west, even for the southeast, seeing a good chance for some warmer than average temperatures. Not really good news for the west at all, though. Definitely not good right there. It's a day 6 to 10 precipitation. It doesn't look any better from the northwest, where they are seeing some major wildfire problems. Definitely not good news for the west there. However, parts of California, kind of neutral with the precipitation. It ain't bad. But a decent chunk of the east here does have a chance for above average precipitation as well. Some of these could be remains from Henry as well. But then things start to change across the east. We'll see a period of warmer temperatures, but then things start to shift. We start to see more of a trough across parts of the eastern United States, and then more bad news for the west. A ridge will start to build, unfortunately. This is all going to be caused by what's called the NAO, or the Northern Atlantic Oscillation. And this could control the weather for a good chunk of the United States here. But let's check out precipitation very quickly here. You do see here, unfortunately, parts in the north and west staying dry here. However, across parts of the south and east coast, looking a little bit wetter. Typically, well, let's kind of look through here first. So this is the NAO forecast from the GFS ensembles. And this is where we're at right now. We are slightly negative. However, the majority of models do bring this a little bit more negative. Typically in a negative NAO, that could lead to some more troughing across the east. But it's also going to lead to some ridging across the west. So more than likely here, later, sometime in probably into late August, we're going to see a decent cool down in the eastern United States here. That can also lead to maybe possibly some severe weather, even for a chance for some stronger low pressure systems. So this is definitely something we need to monitor here as well. This could really change up the weather across parts of the eastern United States very soon. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you already like my channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put in the comment section down below. I'll answer you guys' questions. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.